Part 1. You will hear a telephone conversation between a woman and a park ranger. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Almond Valley Poppy Reserve, may I help you?
Is the nature reserve open now?
Yes, we are actually open all year, although this is the best time of year to see the wildflowers.
Are the poppies blooming yet?
Absolutely. They started to bloom last week and are already beautiful, but they should peak and be in full bloom at the end of the month.
Oh, I was planning on coming at the end of this week. Is that too early?
No, not at all. The hills are already covered with orange poppies.
I thought poppies were red.
Not in California. I've never seen a red poppy here.
The poppy reserve is in Ocean County, right?
Right. From Lakeside, you'll need to drive about an hour east.
What time does the reserve open?
The reserve is open from sunrise to sunset. It's best to come early in the morning to beat the crowds, but for the best photography, you might want to consider a mid-afternoon visit on a weekday.
I heard that there are a lot of rattlesnakes in the desert. Is it dangerous to walk about?
Most wildlife is quite safe. There are very few people bitten by rattlesnakes, so we do recommend wearing trousers just to be on the safe side.
All right. I was hoping that I might have the chance to see some wildlife, too. Oh, how much is the admission to the reserve?
It's $5.
Can I use my National Park Pass to enter the reserve?
Unfortunately not, since it is a state park, not a national park.
All right. I heard from a friend that there is a nature tour available. Can you tell me about it?
Certainly, but can you excuse me just a sec? I'll be right back.
Okay.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
Hello?
Yes, I'm still here.
Now, you are interested in the nature tours, right?
Oh, there's more than one?
Yes. We have the general tour, which is the one your friend may have taken, but we also have 2 more specialized tours. Starting at 7:30 a.m. is our general tour. That's early for some people, I know. It's offered every hour, too. But it's a great time, and it only lasts 30 minutes.
Is that the tour that takes you to the vista points?
Yes, that is one of the highlights, along with a film introducing the park and the museum. You're welcome to tour the museum at your leisure. It's a great tour for those who just want to take panoramic pictures with automatic cameras.
Well, if I come all that way, I'd like to have a more detailed tour.
Then you are in luck, because we have a wonderful wildflower tour every 2 hours from 8 a.m. It lasts 1 hour, and the volunteer will give you information about many of the flowers on the reserve.
Besides the poppies, will cream cups be in bloom?
Yes, and you will see lots of sage, too. We have a volunteer who is really good at giving tips on close-up photography.
You mentioned another tour.
Yes, the last one is the wildlife tour, but it is offered at very limited times.
Is that because most of the wildlife is nocturnal?
Yes, so we offer this tour only 2 times, 5:30 a.m. or 7 p.m.
Wow, that early? But don't the snakes and lizards like the sun?
Right. First, let me say it takes about an hour and a half, but you will have the opportunity to see other animals like coyotes, quail, and roadrunners. You have to get here before the crowds arrive or after most of them leave.
Well, that makes sense. Does it require a lot of walking?
More like a lot of standing, but most of the time you will be at one or two locations. So we recommend bringing a tripod and zoom lens if you want to take pictures.
Well, thank you very much. You've been extremely helpful and informative.
You're welcome. Glad I could be of service.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Now, listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14.
Hello, and thanks to everyone for being on time. The meeting will be fairly short and will only be looking at fire procedures. I had a similar meeting with the senior fire officers earlier today, but you're all here because you've volunteered to act as fire wardens for your own particular department. And for some of you, this will be your first time in the role. Although you'll probably have taken part in several fire drills since you've been here. But now the construction work is finished and we have a couple of new corridors and stairways, we need the meeting to update everyone. And before I forget, you might have noticed a bit of upgrading last week. The handheld fire extinguishers, the standard ones on the wall, the report says they're all working well, as is the overhead sprinkler system. But the old alarm system has been replaced and should be a lot more reliable. Anyway, as fire wardens, you have a number of responsibilities. Okay, those wardens responsible for the factory buildings, you'll remember we had a minor fire back in January. Luckily, the fire doors around the room stopped most of the smoke from getting out, but the alarm should have been pressed a lot earlier. From what I understand, staff felt somewhat reluctant to activate it themselves and were looking for someone senior. So please ensure that everyone knows it's their responsibility to take action immediately. Can you also make sure that if anyone new has been hired since then, that they've read the fire notices? And wardens for office departments, you'll also have to have a word with your staff. When the fire alarm went off in January in that minor fire, people got out of the office building pretty quickly. That was fine. But once they were out, they stood right in front of the doors. So if the fire crews had needed to access the offices, they would have been prevented. Good to see that everyone had left their bags and stuff behind, though.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 15 to 20 on page 4. Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
Okay, next on the agenda. There's a few aspects of fire safety that we need to go through with all you wardens. Firstly, we want to make sure that when we have the next fire drill, there's nothing blocking the way in the escape routes. No obstacles, I mean. So please have a look at that as soon as possible. We want to be able to get outside very quickly. One thing that should definitely be on your to-do list is making sure no one's locked the fire doors and that it's easy enough to get through them. Now, you might remember that last year we had a fire officer come and visit and show us what to do if we see a colleague starting to suffer from the effects of smoke inhalation. Well, the same officer's coming back to lead another session. Another issue is how to handle the fire extinguishers. Someone from the local fire department is booked in to teach people how to do that. I think it would be a good idea if fire wardens and department staff attended those sessions. Let's see, what else is on the list? Oh yes, the evacuation points. The green area behind the main car park, the pavement on Hunter Street, and the unused area behind the factory car park. Fire wardens need to make sure all staff are familiar with these locations for evacuation, so please send out emails directly after the meeting. And the last point is to do with flammable liquids. I believe there have been a few concerns about where they were being stored in the warehouse, but that's been resolved now. However, if anyone has anything else to report, do let me know.
Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
I've had a look at your draft presentation plan and compared it with mine, Kath, and we seem to have the same basic structure. We've both included the same three main sections, that's the anatomy of the foot, the injuries and the treatment, and we've organised our presentations in the same way. But the types of sports we've chosen to illustrate the possible injuries aren't the same.
I'll deal with the anatomy bit. I've got notes and a handout on that from Professor Gilligan's lecture.
Oh, I was hoping to do that. I've downloaded some useful stuff. I do think we should limit this section though. We don't want to spend much time on anatomy when the main focus is on the treatment.
That's true, but in the last section, maybe the two of us could show how some of these therapies actually work. I could be the patient and you could do the treatment.
Good idea, because it's hard to find pictures as injuries are mostly internal. It would be good to hear some first-hand accounts from injured athletes too.
Yeah, but we don't have time.
No. Should we then discuss different types of heel injury? It's worth pointing out that these vary enormously in how bad they are. It might be just a pulled muscle, or a bone injury which needs surgery. Sometimes only an expert can tell the difference.
Excellent. I'll do the slides on that. Leave that one to me.
Now, what about causes of heel injuries?
Well, it's easy enough to list them. Overuse, improper footwear.
Yes, incorrect running style.
They're all relevant, but for simplicity, let's just pick one cause. Say, stuff about changing your training habits suddenly.
You mean like suddenly doing a lot of mountain training? Yes, that's a good idea. And there was research on that in the latest edition of Physio Journal, wasn't there? Professor Gilligan recommended it to us.
Great. You can leave the bit on stretching techniques to me. I really like all that stuff.
So, what's going to be your approach there?
Well, I'll summarise all the various techniques with visual support, and then I'll make the point that the stretching should be carefully managed. Obviously, you have to be careful not to overstretch, and to stretch only when your muscles are warmed up. Otherwise, you could do yourself more harm than good. It's also important that on a supervised programme, stretching is later on combined with balance exercises, which stretch and also strengthen the muscles.
Okay then.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30 on page 5. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
It's always useful to have some information on case studies at the end, in case we're short of material. Did you manage to find anything?
Yes, a female runner in her 30s talking about her treatment for a swollen heel. Initially, she rested the injury. This did help to reduce the swelling, although it was still a little bit uncomfortable. Then she applied an ice pack to the injury twice a day.
Did that work?
Well, she persisted with this treatment for the first month, but decided it wasn't helping. After this period, she was shown how to use deep tissue massage techniques and was surprised at how much freedom of movement this created in her foot.
Wasn't she having ultrasound treatment?
Yes, she was having sessions at the hospital, but she remained unconvinced about its value. She felt the same about the balancing exercises she was prescribed.
Okay, that's interesting. I looked at the aftercare program of a male sprinter who was allowed to do some sports activity as part of his rehabilitation. After 4 months of treatment, he did some light running on grass, wearing shoes that gave plenty of support to his injured heel.
So it didn't hurt?
Well, he found the heel was sore afterwards, and the same happened with some jumping exercises he was asked to try.
Did he go to the gym and use weights?
Yes, after a few weeks. And if he used light weights, he could train without pain. He also tried cycling and found this beneficial, as his foot was not making contact with the ground. He expected a similar result with swimming, but found the repetitive kicking motion was actually aggravating the injury.
Well, both these case studies have value.
Section 4. You will hear a university professor giving a lecture on the influence of children on the adult diet. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40 on pages 7 and 8. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Today we continue with our series of lectures on diet and society in the 21st century. We are all aware of the obesity epidemic facing our society. The reasons for this are well documented and are mainly due to poor eating habits coupled with too little exercise. In fact, a National Health and Nutrition Survey here in the U.S. concluded that the average total food intake increased considerably between the years 1971 and 2000. This appears to be a general trend across most age groups. In fact, apart from the over 60s, all areas of American society are consistently above the dietary guidelines for caloric intake and saturated fat. However, total fat consumption is highest for teenagers, and there is a clear correlation with fast food consumption. Among the wide range of factors influencing an individual's dietary choices, one of the strongest influences is the home. It will come as no surprise that within a family, the fat intakes of husbands and wives and parents and children who cohabit are remarkably similar. Many people assume that this relationship indicates the influence of parents on their children, but we wanted to ask if children influence poor diets in adults. This hypothesis had not been tested in a national sample until now. In our study, we focused only on adults, and we set our lower age limit at 17 and the upper one at 65. The key variable was the presence or absence of children, so we identified only those adults whose children were under 17. Other variables included the age of the adult, level of education they had reached, their ethnic background, their income, and foreign-born status. To obtain our data, first we conducted interviews in the respondents' own homes, and all in all we interviewed 6,600 adults aged over 17. Then we invited them to mobile examination centers where surveys were conducted. From this information, we were able to focus not only on the total fat intake, but also on the person's total caloric consumption. Our results show that the presence of children led to significantly higher levels of both fat consumption and saturated fat in adults. We found on average that adults with children in the home ate 4.9 grams per day of fat more than adults without children. This result is consistent irrespective of race, gender, or age. The foods more commonly were convenience items high in fat or sugar, including pizza, salty snacks, and ice cream. Interestingly, there is a significantly higher percentage of adults in this group who drink milk. There are many explanations for this increased fat intake. Hectic schedules where parents try to balance work, family, and leisure put time at a premium. Another issue is children's preference for fatty foods or foods with a high sugar content. Fast foods and ready-to-eat foods are convenient choices. It is inconvenient to prepare different meals for both the children and the parents, so it is likely that adults consume the same as their children. Of course, there were limitations to our study. One of these is that we did not take into account the number of minors in each household, which could have an effect on the adult who feeds the children. In addition, this study does not take into account the relationship of the adult to the minor. We could also postulate that the older a child gets, the more independent he or she becomes, and so the influence a child has on an adult may lessen depending on the age of the child. In terms of recommendations as a result of this study, we would like to see more research conducted to overcome the limitations outlined earlier. We also feel there is a need for even further research into the influence that friends can have on our fat intake, given the clear link we've established between family members.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.